Everybody, welcome back to Saturdays in the SEC, episode 105. We hope everybody had a Merry Christmas. We're here for our playoff preview episode. But before we get into it, I want to take a few minutes to thank everyone for a great 2023. We launched this YouTube channel before the season started, and we really appreciate to those who have tuned in to us. Just going to ask for a couple favors as we exit 2023, but if you would like and subscribe, if you haven't already, please feel free to comment on our videos. With any kind of suggestions, anything you want to hear about. If you like what you heard, if you want to hear something else, any kind of comments or critiques, we'll definitely take it, and that we're very open to that. So please, if you would, that'd help us out a lot. Like and subscribe to the channel here on YouTube. And then our Twitter space at Saturdays_SEC. We post a good bit on there as well, obviously posting all the episodes. So be sure to give us a follow on there if you haven't already as well. So we just want to ask that as we exit 2023, and we appreciate all of those that have tuned into us, and we're hoping for an even bigger 2024. Got a lot to talk about in college football. I mean, there's some really fun things ahead of us. And then really within this next week, obviously we got the playoffs coming up on Monday. We're recording this Wednesday, the 27th. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the transfer portal first, and then recap signing day before we get into our preview. So without further ado, we're going to get into the portal talk a little bit, just recapping some headlines in the last week. Starting off with Walter Nolan, we've talked a lot about him, number one player in the portal. Ole Miss is able to officially add him to the number one portal class in the country. So that's a huge get for Lane Kiffin and Pete Golden, that defense, and they're making a really nice run to try to get at the top of the SEC and kind of stay where they were this year and have a legitimate shot to make the playoffs next year. We know what they're returning on the offensive side of the ball, and they've really beefed up their defense with some legitimate talent. So that's going to be a very formidable team next year. Trevor Etienne, the Florida running back, is headed to Georgia, which was kind of expected. Think he's going to be a huge hit there in Georgia. He's a heck of a running back, so I'm excited to see that. LT Overton, the defensive lineman from Texas A&M, is transferring to Alabama. I think he's going to play a big role in that rotation next year. And then Malik Murphy, Texas backup quarterback's going to Duke. It's a big get from Andy Diaz there, the new head coach at Duke. Trey Moore, the UTSA edge rusher, is going to Texas. He's kind of been one of the top-rated players in the portal and very sought after once he entered. And then I do want to mention Evan Stewart. He's officially in the portal now. He's not committed to anywhere. Thought it was kind of interesting that Alabama and Texas is not considered big players for him. That's not likely at the time, according to On3. But some of the top contenders they named were Ole Miss, go figure that one, FSU, Oregon, Tennessee, and USC. So obviously some very big-time schools on that list. A lot of potentially really good fits for Evan Stewart, but kind of what's your take of this transfer portal headlines in the last week or so?
Yeah, absolutely. Lane Kiffin, again, as we touched on last week, he's really, building a really good foundation off of the portal. I believe he had 21 guys through high school rankings, and he's got 10 or 11 through the portal. So that's 31 new guys coming into the team, along with a bunch of the guys that stayed and are coming back next year. So he's been able to add some sure enough talent that's going to help them continue to compete. And I think that they're going to be they're going to go from a pretender to a contender, especially in the 12 teams. So I like the way that he's attacking the portal. You got Tyler Barron, Juice Wells, Kamarian Richardson, and then Walter Nolan. Just those are four of the top players that were in the portal and that all landed on the same team. A bunch of snaps under their belts, a bunch of experience, and you can't. That's the one thing you can't coach, man. That just comes with obviously playing time, and so big time gets on both sides of the ball too for Lane Kiffin. So he's tearing it up. Colorado's back in the portal again. That's kind of another big overhaul. Last year, they pretty much had 80-something guys, I think, come in or something along those lines. Pretty much overhauled their whole entire roster this year. I don't remember the exact number they have coming in, but they're the number 2 portal class, I think, 2 or 3, somewhere along those. So they're getting a bunch of guys and overhauling some more of the roster. Prime's a big believer that they're going to be competing for the championship or for the playoffs next year in the 12 team. He's a big believer in it. He said they were going to be pretty good this year, and compared to what they were the year before, they were pretty good. I mean, they won 4 times more than the games they won last year. Didn't end the season very hot. Had a big, one of their games was a blown lead back in October. They were up, I believe, 30 or something so in halftime, and people were posting stuff on their Instagram stories to get their merch out and stuff, and they ended up losing the game. Lost me some money. I'll remember that one for a while. But there's a bunch of teams going to the portal. But the one team that I'm scratching my head on a little bit, and not necessarily losing faith in, but definitely pumping the brakes on a little bit. And the way that this podcast has been talking about them is Florida Gators, man. That they've had some guys in the high school ranks decide to flip last minute, and then they've had some guys decide to hit the portal. Their biggest player, probably their best player, most consistent player, Trevor Etienne's out of the portal, like you just mentioned, going to Athens. Some other people have entered the portal for Florida. I mean, the edge rusher, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Uwe Malin. I'm going to butcher it, but I mean, big time guys from Florida are hitting the portal and going landing in other big time spots that they're going to play right away. It's kind of, I feel sorry for the Gators down there in Gainesville, man. I mean, they're Napier. He's doing what he can, but I feel sorry for him a little bit because these guys are just jumping ship without him getting a legit firm hold on that program.
Yeah, I agree with you. And kind of while we're on that, just kind of shifting gears to National Signing Day and the recruiting rankings, from the high school perspective. Like I said, for me, the biggest loser from National Signing Day was Florida, especially within the SEC. They come into the day with a 10th ranked class. They finish at number 16. Obviously, still have the late period, but most of the players, 90 to 95% signed during this early period. So a class that had a lot of promise in the beginning and during the season was up to 3rd at one time. Just a very lackluster finish for them. I want to say they had a few guys flip on signing day, but really in the last month or 2 leading up to signing day, they believe they had 7 total guys flip. So some pretty highly rated guys, and not to keep dunking on them or running the ground, because I mean they still had a very solid class and headlined by a couple really talented guys. DJ Lagway, the quarterback, kind of the prize of that class. LJ McCray. There was a little it was really teetering on disaster because early in the day on signing day he was saying he was going to push back him signing to later on in the period or maybe to February. He ended up signing that day though, so they were able to lock that down, and that was kind of touch and go there for several hours on signing day. So them getting his signature on the paper was huge because he was, like I said, one of the prizes of that class. So, and the way it had been treading water, they needed a big win, so they were able to get that. But it just didn't end up being what everybody thought it was because they went on such a run during the summer leading up to the season. Obviously a lot of people were like, hey, they're really going to turn it around. They just weren't able to finish it. So obviously that does give me cause for concern going forward. And as I mentioned at length before about their schedule next year, it's going to be a tough go for sure. But some of the biggest winners for me on signing day, actually going to pull up the rankings as well, but Georgia locking up the number 1 class, even with Dylan Raiola flipping, thought that was huge for them to flip KJ Bolden from Florida State. Obviously Auburn was in on him as well. That commitment was very, that recruitment was very fluid for a while. Thought he might be going to Auburn, thought he might be sticking with Florida State, ended up at Georgia. So that was a a big get for Georgia. And once he was able to flip, that pretty much locked up that number one class for Georgia. So obviously a really nice day for them, being able to land Bolden's commitment. Alabama did not land Edric Houston, the Ohio State committed edge rusher. A lot of people had crystal balled him that morning of signing day, but weren't quite able to close on that. But were able to flip a couple guys. Were able to flip running back from Miami that was committed to Miami, which I thought was huge. And then Kevin Riley, he's actually from Tuscaloosa County, so right there in Alabama's backyard. And then they were able to flip Arian Hampton from Texas, an athlete. Think he's a dynamic playmaker with the ball in his hands. There was a little bit of back and forth whether he's going to play corner or wide receiver. Think he's going to play receiver at Alabama. Some were thinking he might, or Texas may have wanted him to play corner. So they were able to get him to flip on signing day as well. So a couple of big pickups there for Alabama. I thought they closed pretty strong. And now I want you to talk about Auburn a little bit, a team that closed extremely, extremely well. Got all the way up to number 7. I mean, what a foundational class for Hugh Freeze in his first full cycle, getting up in the top 10 and being the 4th ranked SEC class. And considering some of the teams that they had to pass to get up there, I thought it was extremely impressive the way they closed.
Yeah, absolutely. They did a fantastic job. I mean, getting the big wide receivers, the playmakers in there. That's kind of really what this class was. He was going after, what Hugh Freeze was going after. It seemed like just padding the wide receiver class, and we have some offensive line guys that was desperately needed. Obviously, flipped Demarius Williams, and then Jamonte Waller. I'm super excited about. It's another big name guy coming off the edge. I'm excited with the foundation that Hugh's building, and he's pitching these guys, and you can come in, have an immediate impact to get a program back to where they're supposed to be in the upper echelon of things, where they've been before but have struggled to be of late. But getting them back to that standard and setting that standard and being those guys, and obviously the atmosphere that's there. It's something that's easy to pitch for sure compared to other places, but a name that I'm super excited about. We've been talking and, kind of cutting up a little bit back and forth, but Ryan Williams pushes his date back to February. He's going to sign in February on the actual National Signing Day. And he's got, I believe, 5 visits lined up, and Hugh Freeze requested to have the last one before he signs. And so as of right now, Ryan Williams will be in Auburn for his last official visit before he ends up signing in February. So they could officially finish out the Freeze 5. If that's able to happen, obviously I think Auburn would end up in a 5 or 6 spot if that was to happen. But I think honestly, it realistically is probably going to end up at Alabama. But Auburn having the last visit definitely gives him a little bit of an edge. But I still think that he's going to end up at Alabama from the talks and the things that I've been reading. But extremely thrilled with this class. I mean, they're already there on campus, going through practice for the bowl preps this week. So that's another main big thing about getting bowl eligible, man, is you get your next class and the younger guys get in there and get acclimated a little bit before the off season hits. And then they know a little bit what to expect going into spring ball in the next season. And a lot of these guys are going to be expected to play and compete and get out there often. And so it's getting them ingrained in it and getting them a little warmed up, getting their, dipping their toes in the water a little bit. It's definitely bodes well for the future, and it gives them a little head start on what to expect come spring and fall.
Yeah, I was just really impressed with the way not only the class they put together, but the way they were able to finish. Like I said, that's big with Ryan Williams getting the last visit's always big. And to be honest, I mean, I really wasn't. I mean, obviously, I didn't want to lose Perry Thompson to Auburn. I mean, but with him, I wasn't sweating it too bad. I'd be very, very upset if Ryan Williams ended up at Auburn. I mean, that would be. I mean, Perry's a great player, but I think Ryan Williams is a different caliber dude. I mean, I think this is one of the best players to come out of state in some time, honestly. So obviously there's a reason everybody's pushing so hard for him. I mean, this dude's a special talent, and I think these guys, Cam Coleman, I think it's going to be special. Same with Perry. They're both big time talents, but I think you're seeing the resources going to Ryan Williams for a reason because this dude is different. So yeah, I'll be very upset if he doesn't end up at Alabama, but I think I feel good about it. I do believe he's going to end up at Alabama, but you never know. The way recruiting is now is never they're never really there until they're on campus for sure. So, regardless of how good you feel about it, things can change quickly in this recruiting game nowadays. So, we'll keep an eye on that as we move to February. There's still some other names out there that everybody will be watching as well. So, another team I want to cover was Texas. Ended up with a top 3 class. I mean, what momentum they have. You couldn't ask for them to have much more momentum coming into the SEC next year. Thought they ended extremely strong as well. They had a great signing day. Obviously, their class headlined by Colin Simmons, the edge rusher. Ryan Wingo's a huge receiver commit. And then getting Xavier Philistine from Florida, one of the guys Florida lost. They got Kobe Black the other day. So I really like their class a lot, finishing in the top 3. And then a couple guys I want to hit on too is they don't have many transfers, but I love the guys that they have gotten so far. I mean, you look at Andrew Makuba has been a starter at Clemson for multiple years. I think he's going to come in and have an immediate impact. Heard a lot of good things about Matthew Golden, the receiver transfer from Houston. They think he's got some A.D. Mitchell to his game. So I think that's a guy that's going to come in and have some big playability for them and kind of what they've been accustomed to. And then obviously we mentioned a little bit earlier, Trey Moore, the edge rusher from UTSA, who's been one of the most highly sought after not only defensive players, but players overall in the portal this cycle. So the guys they have landed so far, I think, are very big impact guys. And Texas is to that point now where they don't have to overhaul their roster with transfer portal. But they have been extremely consistently in the top 5 and 10 in high school recruiting. So they're only looking to supplement their roster and fill a few holes here and there. And I think that's exactly what they've done with these guys. So really like their high school class, like the transfers they've added to supplement to their roster through the transfer portal. So obviously they're in the playoffs next week, had a great season. So I think Texas, outside of them winning the title, I mean, they're coming into the SEC with about as much momentum as you can, hoping to compete with Alabama and Georgia at the top of the SEC next year.
Yeah, and they like you said, they finished 3rd in the recruiting rankings. They finished 3rd last year as well. So that they're building, they're doing what they need to do to stay successful and sustain success for a long time. I mean, just look here, and in the top 5, you got Georgia, Alabama, Texas, Oregon, and Ohio State. All of those teams every single year are contending for the playoffs, potential national championship, or win the playoffs and potential national championship. I mean, the top 3 classes this year, Georgia, Alabama, Texas, all 3 of those teams, are in the playoffs right now. So that just shows you the importance of recruiting. I mean, everybody knows and talks about your recruiting being important, but especially, obviously, it's always been that way. But with the way that recruiting has changed, it is so much more important nowadays to cash in on the guys that you have and to make sure that you're getting the right guys that fit your program and it's going to come in and that's going to mold to you. You don't mold to them. Things like that is super important because, like I said, it shows right here the top 5 programs right here are some of the top programs that were in college football this season, competing to the last few weeks. So it is the most important thing. If you want to win championships and compete consistently, it all comes down to high school recruiting. The portal helps for sure, patching places, but if you want to consistently be good and contend for the postseason, it starts here in recruiting. So, super thrilled with all these guys. I mean, you look in the top 10, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 of the top 10 classes are an SEC team. I'm including Oklahoma and Oklahoma and Texas in that because these guys are going to be in the SEC next year when they get in school and start playing. So 6 of the top 10 classes are in the SEC. So it just shows you the future is going to be the future is going to be absolutely fantastic. And I'm more than happy to see all these teams from the SEC being in the top recruiting classes because it just makes it more fun. It makes it mean more. And if you win and you do win the conference and you do go through that conference to be the champion and go in the postseason, it makes it, it matters more a little bit. It feels a little better because you're getting it against these top teams that are coming in and year out. And then the battles on the field and the rivalries on the field transition to the rivalries off the field and the recruiting. And you get on, social media. Twitter's the best during recruiting time because you get fans chirping back and forth with each other, people talking to the players. I mean, jokes flying left and right. It's some of my favorite off-season content or, dead period content for sure. But it just makes everything more fun with the recruiting off the field, those rivalries with other teams. That it's the game within the game. I love it.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, especially being in the SEC, being fans of SEC teams and the conference as a whole, like there's so many rivalries, like you said, not only on the field but in recruiting because all these schools are going head to head. Like as you mentioned, 6 of the top 10 are SEC schools. I think we counted 11 or 12 of the top 25 are SEC. I mean, it's just completely dominated by the SEC. And as you said, a lot of people have compared to, high school recruiting is like the draft now in the NFL, and the transfer portal is kind of like free agency. And you look at some of the best teams, I mean, obviously have a mix of both, but all of the top teams have in common they hit on their draft picks. Like you have to have successful draft picks to be to be an elite team. You can obviously kind of build through free agency a little bit, but you want to be more homegrown and build through the draft. And that's kind of like, kind of comparing it to college football. It's like high school recruiting. Like you want to build your program through high school recruiting and have the majority of your program being built that way. And like I said, you see these top teams not having to build through the portal, obviously. They just supplement and work, find guys, cherry pick guys that can fill a hole for them and guys that need to play, obviously, that want bigger roles or want to be at a bigger school, but also are needing to play as well. And then, obviously, those teams need that person to play. So, it's more to supplementally fill your roster out and not necessarily build your roster through the portal. So, some of the teams we mentioned have been the best at that. Think that's going to continue. But yeah, really impressed with what Auburn did. Obviously, the top 3 with Georgia, Alabama, Texas closed extremely strong. So yeah, I'm curious to see how things develop. Like I said, most everybody signed in this early period, but we'll still have a few guys, late in the cycle, and we'll keep monitoring that until February. But kind of shifting gears to our playoff previews now.
Before we do that, I do have something I want to ask you about.
Sure.
Have you heard the rumors about Brian Kelly?
Yes, I'm actually glad you brought that up.
Okay, I want to talk about that a little bit. All right, so Jim Harbaugh, Michigan head coach, he's been flirting with going to the NFL the last 2 or 3 seasons. The hot name right now is the Chargers. They're going to try to get Jim Harbaugh to land down there in LA. But Michigan just offered Jim Harbaugh a 10-year, $125 million contract with a clause in it that says you cannot entertain an NFL coaching job for the next year. So basically, he is there through the end of this year and will be back next year. It's basically what this contract is offering if he signs it. But he hasn't signed it yet, which would make him the highest paid coach in college football, which would then make Nick Saban even more higher paid because he's got the clause in his contract where he's got to be the highest paid coach. So it will make college football crazy. But anyway, if Jim Harbaugh does not sign it, he ends up going to LA or any other NFL team. there are people in reports that are highly regarded, people that know what they're talking about, have justified sources. I cannot think of this guy's name that broke it. He has a news or a radio show down in Baton Rouge affiliated with the LSU program, but he says that if the Michigan job comes open, that Brian Kelly is their top target, and he believes that this would be that Brian Kelly would leave LSU for Michigan. I think that is insane. But what are your thoughts on that? Because apparently this rumor has some truth to it, and it could catch some heat and start rolling pretty quick if Harbaugh does decide to go to the NFL. Does Brian Kelly leave the SEC after 2 seasons and goes to Michigan? Because if Brian Kelly leaves by December 31st or earlier, he owes LSU $3 million. If he leaves January 1st or later, he owes LSU $2 million.
Yeah, I'm very curious. I mean, that was a very interesting scenario that was brought up the other day. I will say this, I do think, like, I think if Jim Harbaugh is going to leave and go back to the NFL, I think it's going to be after this season. I
Yeah.
think because there are some jobs available that are pretty attractive or going to be available probably in the league. I think with this is his best. I think this is definitely the best chance he's had so far to win a national title. Maybe the best opportunity that he gets. Not to say that Michigan's necessarily going to drop off, but I mean this is probably about as good of an opportunity as they're going to have, or at least so far. So I will say this: I do think if he does go back to the NFL, it's going to be after this year. You know, you look at the investigations with the sign stealing, and then also the other investigation with the recruiting dead period. There are some rules broken during that time. So there's a couple investigations, and the NCAA things kind of hanging over their head a little bit. So I could see this as a time for him to go back to the NFL. To be honest, I don't have any intel or anything. I actually do think Brian Kelly would take the Michigan job if that scenario does happen, like is mentioned, and say Harbaugh goes to the Chargers or the Commanders or wherever. If that Michigan job comes open, I actually do think Brian Kelly would take it and head back north.
That's what reports are saying from highly talented people, and they're saying that he's not a good fit down there in Baton Rouge, and that he would be the number one target in Ann Arbor, and that they believe there's mutual interest there if it does come open, which is insane to me. I can't believe this. LSU is not a job where you go and you stop off for a few years and then go somewhere else. It's not that. It is a job that is just as big, if not bigger, than Michigan. But there's reports saying that it is almost a shoe-in that if the Michigan job comes open, he's there.
Yeah, I mean, I could see it. I mean, he's the type of guy I could see him wanting to head back north. And like you said, too, the LSU job doesn't take a backseat to anybody. I mean, it's one of the premier jobs.
Yeah. It's a
in
top
the
5.
country.
It's a top 5 job in college football. Not saying Michigan isn't, but LSU 100% is a top 5 job in college football.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, obviously, you're not going to leave, like, there's hardly any jobs in the country that you would leave LSU for. I mean, like you just laid out. I mean, you're not, once you get to LSU, you're not really going anywhere else necessarily.
That's a place you get fired from. That's not a place you choose to leave.
Exactly. So, but if I think Michigan's one of the few
that's fair,
that he would consider. You know, thinking about him too, he's from, you know, he coached at Cincinnati a long time. He coached at Notre Dame for a long time.
Wasn't it Central Michigan too?
I believe he was. He's from, I believe, the Northeast originally, like Boston area. Yeah. I think he's actually from like Boston, but so he, you know, he's been up north. He's been in the Midwest a lot. He's familiar with that area. So I could see like Michigan is one of that, or like Ohio State if it came open. Like that's probably the only job up there he would leave LSU for. It's probably one of maybe that may be one of the only ones, honestly. But I really could. I don't know for sure that he would go, but I could definitely see it. I wouldn't be shocked. It would be a crazy scenario to happen for sure, because like you said, People don't just leave LSU. I mean, that'd be extremely, extremely rare. And at one time, too, nobody thought like a coach would ever leave Notre Dame.
You're
So,
right.
like, what about him willingly choosing to leave Notre Dame and then willingly choosing to leave LSU? Like, that would be absolutely insane. Like, if you would have told somebody that 25 years ago, nobody ever believed it. So, that would be something if it did happen. But I will say with Harbaugh, I do think if he does go back to the league, I think it's going to be now. Like, I think the timing
Yeah.
now makes a lot of sense
He's
considering all
losing a
the
lot of
external
guys.
factors. So, yeah, if it's going to happen, I would not be shocked if it didn't happen this offseason. But yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see.
If Brian Kelly does leave LSU, who do you think way too early? Who do you think LSU goes after to be their next guy?
Oh man, that's tough. Oh, I don't know. I mean, the first one that pops in my mind, I'm probably gonna say this for most everybody that comes open in the South, is Dan Lanning. I mean, that would be that's one that pops into my mind. But man, I don't have a real list of candidates off the cuff. But I guess that would be the first one. I would say I don't know if he'll leave Washington anytime soon, but I think Kalen DeBoer is a hell of a coach, though.
Yeah.
Would not be shocked if he doesn't end at even a bigger school. And not that Washington's small or anything, but they're going to the Big Ten too, so that makes it even more attractive. But that dude's a hell of a coach, and he's won wherever he's been. So I don't know if he would. Everybody talks about fit and stuff, but I think that's a guy that's going to end up probably getting a big time job eventually. But I guess Dan Lanning would probably be the first one that would come to my mind.
That's fair. Yeah. I was just curious if you had heard about that news, and I want to talk about it a little bit.
No, I agree. It would be crazy to see. I mean, kind of throw a wrench into already crazy off season. But man, that would be some news if Brian Kelly LSU to Michigan would be crazy. But like I said, if Harbaugh is going to go back pro, which I do think there is some interest there, I think this offseason will make about as sense as any time. So
100%. I agree with you 100%.
But kind of getting into Jim Harbaugh's team now at Michigan, previewing this Rose Bowl, man, I cannot wait for this. Doesn't get much better. I mean, this is if there's ever been a helmet game, this is it. Alabama, Michigan, the two winningest teams in college football history in Pasadena, Rose Bowl, New Year's Day. I mean, that to me, that's about as college football gets. So if there's ever been a helmet game, I think this is it. Kind of diving into this matchup though a little bit. I think the over under, I would probably go with the over, to be honest with you, 45 and a half. I mean, I get the theory here that it's going to be a grinded out type of game. I do feel like it'll be that way. I have a gut feeling though it's going to be a little bit more higher scoring than people think. Really, really like the matchup though. Both teams. I mean, I think both teams want to win the same sort of way. With looking at it from Michigan's perspective, J.J. McCarthy, obviously Alabama's going to look to shut down the run with Blake Corum. I mean, this is one of the best power running teams in the country. But there hasn't been really any games this year where they've had to lean on J.J. McCarthy's arm to win them the game. I think this is the time where they're going to have to lean on him a little bit to win the game. And he's going to have to make some throws to move the chains, to keep drives alive. I think his legs will be more of a factor than they have been all year because we know he's capable of doing that. But like I said before, he just hasn't had to this year. Their defense has been so dominant. They've been able to just grind their way to victories, and they haven't really needed to be explosive offensively. I think this is a day where they're going to need to generate some explosive plays here and there, kind of like they did in the Ohio State game last year. That that was a game where they were able to get some explosive plays and put some points on the board, quicker than they typically would. I think that's going to need to be there. Not that they're going to get a ton of explosives, but I think that's something that it's going to be hard to grind out 10, 12 play drives against this Alabama defense. I think the same can be said for Alabama, too. I think they need to generate some explosive plays, and they've been good at that this year. So definitely think this is game. J.J. McCarthy's going to have to win it with his arm, per se. And I do think his legs will be a factor as well because I think they're going to need them. But I don't know. I just feel like with Alabama, with 3 weeks off, 4 weeks off to get healthy, and you let Kevin Steele and these guys game plan for that long with this defensive front and pass rush, I just don't think Michigan has seen a pass rush like they're going to see with Dallas Turner and Chris Broswell and those guys, the way they can heat up quarterbacks. Kind of saw that in the SEC title game. Going into that game where, Georgia hasn't seen a pass rush like this. Carson Beck really hadn't been knocked off his spot all year. And you saw a different Carson Beck in that game because he didn't have the time and the windows were a lot tighter than he was used to for the previous 12 games. So I think the same for Michigan. And I don't think they really have the skill guys that Georgia does, like Brock Bowers and Ponky. And I know those guys weren't 100%, but I just don't think they have the skill guys to really break it open like they need to. So I do think it's a grinded out game for the most part. I kind of lean into the over, though. I do think it's going to be a little bit higher scoring than people think. But I think in the second half, Alabama's able to put a couple scores on the board and able to pull away just a little bit. I like Alabama by 10 to 14. Think it's going to be super competitive, a very physical game. But I think in the second half, Alabama's just a little too much. With this much time to prepare, it's hard to pick against Nick Saban and Alabama in this spot.
Yeah, I disagree with you a little bit, and just on the over, I would take the under. I think Bama's going to win 28-10, 33-10, somewhere along those lines, 34-10. I just don't. The best defense that Michigan has seen this season, to me, is Ohio State. And talent-wise, they might be there. Bama's probably a little ahead of them talent-wise on paper. But you heard what the Michigan players said after the game, after that matchup, and they just said that they were soft. They weren't out there getting ready, getting after it every single play. They didn't want it as bad as Michigan did. There's one thing that's not going to happen with Alabama. Alabama's not going to roll out there and be soft. They're not going to you're not going to outcompete Alabama. So with that being said, that they didn't struggle per se with Ohio State, but they're not going to be able to control the game against this Alabama team because Alabama is not going to go out there and play soft and play, scared like they were saying Ohio State was. It's just not going to happen. I don't think that Michigan is as hard as they're saying they are because they're not going to be able to outcompete Alabama. It's just not going to happen. Alabama's got more dudes. They're more experienced. They've been in this position way more times. Their quarterback's playing out of his mind right now. The running game's starting to come along. The receivers have played really good the last 2 games. Like you said, they've had some time to heal up a little bit and to scheme up some stuff and prepare for this game for a little while. Everybody's going to be healthy. I think Bama wins in blowout fashion. Like I said, I think they allow maybe 10 points, and I think they score anywhere from 28 to 34. And I think the under's going to hit. If they score 34 and Michigan gets 10, it would hit barely, but it would hit at 44. Yeah. So I think Bama's going to control this game in dominant fashion. I don't think Michigan's got a prayer. I think they're going to need to break a long run early if they have a chance to stay in this game. I just don't see them running all over this Alabama team. And I don't think McCarthy has got the ability to throw all over this Alabama team consistently. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think he's going to be able to do what Quinn Ewers did and drive down the field every single time and answer every single time. I don't see it. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think he's that type of quarterback. And I don't think that the run game for Michigan is as dominant as it needs to be to beat this Alabama team.
Well, too, I just think they're going to be in situations in this game that they haven't been all year. I mean, because they haven't had to throw the ball much to win. I mean, they're against Penn State, their second toughest game on the road. They threw like two passes in the second half. I mean, they ran like 28 straight running plays. I mean, because they knew Penn State's offense wasn't going to do anything. I mean, they're just going to have to do things differently in this game that they haven't had to do all year. Like they're going to actually have to show some balance to win this game. I mean, they're not going to be able to run it 28 straight times and win the game and throw two or three passes in the second half. I think JJ McCarthy has, I believe, 22 pass attempts in the fourth quarter all year. So, I mean, like I said, they just haven't been in that position to where they have to throw the ball consistently to, have success and win games. They've been able to rely on the run game and, throw occasionally. But like I said, they've been ahead in most of these games. Their defense has been dominant. They've had great field position, so their offensive numbers don't look that great. Even though they're a pretty efficient offense, but a lot of times they've had short fields, so their total yardage, is not very high comparatively speaking. But yeah, I just think they're going to be in positions that they haven't been all year. I think Alabama's been in a lot of different spots this year. I mean, you've seen them, you know, have to come back in games a bunch of times, throw their way back into it. So I feel like that Alabama's been in a lot more different situations. So I don't think they're going to be phased by any situation that kind of happens in the game. And then what they did against Georgia, I mean, really convinced me on this. Like they're, you look in the rushing categories, it wasn't dominant, like yards per carry and the rushing total wasn't dominant, but there were stretches in the SEC title game where they were very, very dominant up front. I mean, they were definitely the dominant team, but there were stretches of the game where they were blowing Georgia off the ball. And I mean, it was extremely impressive. And once they were able to do that, I'm like, if you can do that to Georgia, you can do that to anybody in the country. I mean, that was the gold standard coming into the game. Um, Getting that win and the way they were able to get pressure on Carson back, it just convinced me. And I said it before the SEC title game. I said, I think whoever wins that game is going to win it all. I still feel that way. If Georgia would have won the SEC title game, I'd be picking them tonight to win this game. Or I guess it wouldn't be Michigan because Georgia would have been the one, Michigan would have been the two. So we'll be getting a different matchup. But anyway, I would pick Georgia to win no matter what. So I felt like whoever won that game would probably win it all or at least get there in this game. So I'm rolling with the Tide. I think they get it done. I think they have the confidence after winning that SEC title game. And Michigan, honestly, it's hard to pick them because they haven't won these big games. Mm-hmm. They lost the last two semifinal games they've been in. They've lost their last six bowl games. I mean, I don't even think Jim Harbaugh's won a bowl game up there. So, I mean, as good as they've been, they come up small in a lot of these big games. So, kind of one of those things like until it's proven to me, it's hard to, especially going against Nick Saban and Alabama with this long to prepare. I mean, it's hard to go against them in this spot.
Absolutely. What are your thoughts on Texas Washington? Because I think Texas is going to win. I really do. I think they got the better team. I think they have the more complete team. But man, there's something about Washington this year, man. They are special. They've been counted out by multiple people multiple times this season and have pulled through. I mean, they were the underdog against Oregon after they had already beat Oregon. And then another thing came out the week after they beat Oregon that said if they were to face them again, they would still be the underdog. They have been counted out and doubted all season, and they have found a way. They don't care what anybody says. They believe in themselves, and they just get it done. That's the only thing that's keeping me from being so sure about Texas in this game is just, man, Washington has caught lightning in a bottle this year, and if they don't hurt themselves, they very well could win this game. If they don't have self-inflicted wounds, they take care of the ball and don't turn it over. I think they'll be perfectly fine. I think they can answer. Excuse me. I think they can answer with anybody in the country. And though if they play their type of football, their brand of football, I think they'll be perfectly fine and they'll be in this game and have a chance to win it at the end. I think this game is going to be extremely close. I would take the over in this game, whatever it is. I think both teams are going to be in the 30s probably. But I think it's going to come down to the last few possessions and who has the ball last and who controls the clock best in the fourth quarter, because both of these teams are going to be able to put points on the board. I really, really want to say it's going to be Texas that wins, selfishly because I want a Texas-Bama rematch, but also I just think Texas is the better team. But, man, there's just something that's hard to go against Washington, especially after the last few weeks of the season and how they proved everybody wrong and proved they belong where they are. And so it's tough to go against them right now. It really is.
I mean, honestly, I think you hit the nail on the head. Honestly, I'm feeling the exact same way about this game. I love this matchup, and this is like Washington does match up well with Texas in this game. I think, and I've heard of seen it out there. Not saying who said it or anything like that. It's been several people, but people there's some people that are not really giving Washington much of a chance. Not this isn't like pundits or like talking heads. This is just like normal people thinking like this isn't like TCU last year.
No.
Like this Washington team would drill TCU. Like this is and I think people don't realize too. Like the talent is not as there's not as big of a gap as people feel like in this game. Like
No.
Washington is legit a very talented team.
Their wide receivers might be some of the best in the country.
Yeah, their receiver group is one of the best, if not the best in the country, as you mentioned. They've got two really good tackles
in the backfield.
Yeah, Michael Penix, absolute beast. Two really good tackles at linebacker. Got a really good player. Like they're probably going to have 8 or 9, 10 drafted in the first couple rounds of the draft. Like this is a very talented team. Like the talent discrepancy is not as big as I think a lot of people realize in this game. I like the matchup for Washington though. Obviously they're pass first team. They don't run the ball a ton. And I don't think they necessarily have to run it to be balanced. They just need to show a semblance of being balanced, Like I don't think they need to run it a ton, but if they can run it effectively enough to keep Texas honest, I think Texas will be the more physical team, but I don't think it's going to be one of those situations where they're going to dominate. Like, I don't think Washington's going to get overwhelmed physically in this game. Like I said, Texas legit defensive front, so I do think they will probably win more shares than they lose, but I don't think it's going to be dominant on Texas D-line with Washington's O-line. I think Washington can match up fine in this game, even if it is a slight Texas win from that standpoint. But, I like the matchup, though. Just as a fan, I mean, this is going to be super, super entertaining to watch. I'm like you. I think it's going to be a high scoring, in the upper 30s. I would suspect for sure. Can't wait to watch these quarterbacks and these wideouts go to work in this game. It's going to be so much fun. Couldn't ask for much of a better matchup, to be honest with you. I'm like you, though. I do lean Texas. I just think Texas is a little bit better. Just from an overall talent standpoint, don't think it's a huge gap at all, though. And like you said, I think it's going to come down to the last few possessions. I mean, who kind of handles crunch time the best, who kind of handles the moment the best, because neither one of these teams have been in this stage, really. Washington's been in the playoffs before, but it's been a while. 2016, Texas obviously played in some huge games, but they haven't been to the playoffs either. So, kind of who handles the moment the best in the second half. It's obviously going to be a pro-Texas crowd being in New Orleans in the Superdome. You would think it's probably going to be 70% Texas, I would think, or more. So they do have the advantage from that standpoint. Like you, I think Texas is a little too much in the end, but part of Part of me's really wanting to pick Washington, though. I would not be shocked either way, but I'll lean Texas slightly. Can't wait for this matchup, though.
Yeah, this might be one of my favorite matchups all year at the end of it.
Yeah, I agree 100%, man. Like I said, that it's just so compelling, man. You look at both these quarterbacks and the weapons they have, and Texas defensive front going against this Washington O line. Um, Washington defense, they've got some talent on that side of the ball as well. So seeing if they can kind of slow Texas down a little bit. Texas, their one Achilles heel, the one game they lost was they struggled in the red zone against Oklahoma. They got down there a bunch. They just weren't able to convert into points like they needed to. Um, but Washington's red zone defense has not been great. I think it's 110th or so, 115th in the country. So that's one area that, um, Texas could have, Texas should have an advantage. But we've seen them, in their one loss did struggle down there. So I think red zone, offense, defense is going to be critical, and who can, once they get in the red zone, who can put touchdowns on the board is going to be critical in the second half.
Absolutely. You got anything else you want to cover?
I did want to ask you a little bit. I've got all the bowl games pulled up here. What are some other matchups that you're looking forward to? I'll kind of throw mine out there real quick. The one matchup of the whole bowl season that is one of the top ones I'm looking forward to is the Ole Miss offense going against the Penn State defense. Ole Miss, with the guys they've got returning on the offensive side of the ball, as we mentioned the last few weeks, they have a ton of momentum with those returnees, with the guys they've added to the portal. Obviously, they won't play till next year, but just the momentum around the program. I can't wait to see that offense go against this defense. What is your take on that? And then what are some other matchups this bowl season that you're looking forward to as well?
Yeah, obviously the one that jumps out is Ole Miss Penn State for sure. I think that's going to be a really good game. Excited to see what Ole Miss can do with all their guys that are saying they're coming back for another year. Going to have a lot of guys playing that's legit players, not just guys that are filling in spots for the bowl game. But another game that I'm really excited for is Missouri Ohio State. I know Ohio State's not playing every single person they got, but I think that's a intriguing matchup, especially understanding what Missouri is. They haven't been there. They're not a team that's in the top 10 at the end of the year every single year. So it's a cool matchup. I think it's not a common matchup at all. So I think it's a little intriguing for that for sure. I think that Missouri's going to be motivated 100% because of the team that they're playing against to have a chance to go out there and beat this team. And then another one, seeing Luke Fickell play against the SEC again. Wisconsin and LSU going to play each other. I'm extremely excited about that one for sure. I think Nussmeier going to get a chance to go out there and knock some rust off and show everybody what to be excited for next year.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to Tennessee, Iowa. Nico Almaliva getting his first start, the 5-star freshman for Tennessee, with Joe Milton opting out of the game. So I'm excited to see what he can do in his first start against really good competition. I will say there are a lot of downsides now with the bowl games and the way the transfer portal is set up and guys opting out. And not really getting that full effect of guys finishing the season and stuff. But I will say the one upside to it is I think it does open up a lot of opportunities for younger players that get an opportunity maybe a little bit earlier than expected or would under normal circumstances. Like that's a prime example. Normally Joe Milton would be playing. Nico probably wouldn't start till the first game of next year, but kind of gives him a chance to get his feet wet a little bit. And I feel like that's the case for a lot of players, at other, not just at quarterback, but other positions on other teams, getting a chance a little bit earlier than maybe anticipated or, like I said, under normal circumstances. So I do think that is the one positive it does open up opportunities for some younger players to get some legitimate reps and playing time in these bowl games. It's been talked about before how valuable it is for those guys to get, all these bowl practices and get those reps. and that extra practice before the season ends. But some of those young guys getting a chance to actually play huge roles in these bowl games, I do think is beneficial going forward for their future and their development and helping some of these teams as they move on to the next season. So I do think that is one positive from all the opt outs and the transfers and stuff that kind of muddies up the bowl season. But it will be cool to see him get that opportunity. I'm curious to see how he does and some of these, some of the other younger players around the country as well getting opportunities.
Absolutely. I'm thrilled. Obviously, it sucks that the end of the year is coming, but Monday night is going to be so much fun, dude. Alabama, Michigan, Texas, Washington. It's going to be one of the better playoffs that there's been, especially just with all the drama that went into it to finally decide the Final Four. So this postseason is going to be extremely fun. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, me as well. It's gonna be a ton of fun. Like I said, got great matchups all weekend leading into Monday as well. So we appreciate everyone tuning in. We'll be back next week to recap these bowl matchups and obviously the playoffs. Our national title game will be set, and we'll be recapping and then doing that preview sometime after the new year. So thank you again to everybody for tuning in for 2023, us launching this YouTube channel this year. We really appreciate those who have liked and subscribed, and would ask that the people that haven't, if they would do that for us, that would help us out tremendously. And then we're looking forward to a big 2024. There's so much on the horizon with SEC football, and we can't wait to get into it in the future. So I hope you guys have a great new year, and we will catch y'all next week.
Thank you, guys.